I am Rebecca Mitchell, and today I sit in courtroom 304 as my millionaire husband Max tries to destroy me. After 5 years of marriage, he wants a divorce with no financial settlement, claiming I deceived him by being sterile. The prenup he had me sign protects him if I was dishonest. His cold eyes meet mine across the room as his lawyer presents my supposed medical deception. But neither of them knows what I discovered last month. Now Judge Waters holds an envelope that will change everything. If you're watching this, drop a comment letting me know where you're viewing from. Hit that subscribe button and stay with me as I reveal how this nightmare began and the shocking truth that finally set me free. I grew up in a small town in Connecticut where my parents taught at the local high school. We weren't poor, but we definitely weren't rich. My childhood home could fit inside the master suite of the mansion I would later share with Max. College was always the dream, but my parents couldn't afford it, so I worked harder than anyone in my class to earn a full scholarship to Boston University. Those 4 years were a blur of part-time jobs, late-night study sessions, and ramen noodles. But I graduated with honors and landed an entry-level position at Apex Marketing, one of Boston's top firms. Within 3 years, I had worked my way up to senior marketing strategist handling accounts worth millions. My boss called me tenacious. My colleagues called me brilliant. I called myself independent. That independence was something I prided myself on. I had my own apartment, paid off my small student loans, and was saving for a down payment on a condo. Dating wasn't a priority. I had watched too many talented women put their careers on hold for relationships. That wasn't going to be me. At least, that's what I thought until that fateful night at the Boston Children's Hospital Charity Gala. I wasn't there as a guest, but working the event, managing our firm's contribution, and networking with potential clients. That's when Maxwell Richardson walked in. Even if I hadn't known who he was, the subtle shift in the room's energy would have told me he was someone important. At 35, Max was already a tech industry legend, having sold his first company for 9 figures before starting Richardson Innovations, now valued at over $1 billion. What struck me wasn't his wealth or the expensive suit. It was how he seemed genuinely uncomfortable with the attention. While other executives worked the room, Max stayed back speaking intently with the hospital director about their pediatric research program. I overheard enough to realize he actually understood the science they were discussing. Our eyes met when I approached with a champagne tray, a task definitely not in my job description, but necessary when the catering staff fell short. "You don't work for the catering company," he said, surprising me. What gave it away, my uncomfortable shoes or the fact that I don't know which side of you to serve from, I replied. He laughed, a genuine sound that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "The fact that I saw you earlier, giving directions to the event coordinator. We talked for 20 minutes before my boss frantically texted me about a donor needing attention." As I excused myself, Max asked for my business card. "I don't have any potential marketing needs," he said with disarming honesty. "But I'd like to take you to dinner." I should have said no. Office gossip was full of cautionary tales about wealthy men and their temporary fascinations with regular women. But something about his direct approach and the intelligence behind his blue eyes made me hand over my card. Our first date wasn't at some exclusive restaurant as I'd expected. Instead, Max took me to a small Ethiopian place in Cambridge. He had remembered me mentioning I loved trying foods from around the world, but hadn't had Ethiopian yet. That attention to detail would become one of his most endearing qualities during our courtship. Over the next 6 months, Max courted me in a way that felt both old-fashioned and refreshingly authentic. Weekend trips to museums in New York, hiking in Vermont, and sailing along the Massachusetts coastline. He listened when I talked about my work and seemed genuinely interested in my opinions and aspirations. When he first showed me his house mansion, really in Brookline, I felt overwhelmed. The 10-bedroom historic estate with manicured grounds and a staff of 4 was intimidating. I remember thinking I didn't belong in such opulence. "It's just a house," Max said, noticing my discomfort. "What makes it a home is who you share it with." 3 months later, he proposed on a private beach in Martha's Vineyard with a vintage emerald ring rather than a flashy diamond. "It matches your eyes," he said. "And it has history like I hope we'll have." I said yes because I believed I had found that rare thing, a man who valued me for my mind, not as an accessory to his wealth. A man who spoke about wanting children with genuine enthusiasm, who talked about our future family with such conviction that I could almost see our children running across his vast lawn. Our wedding was held at a vineyard in Napa Valley. Despite my protests about the cost, Max insisted on flying out my entire extended family and all my friends. The event was featured in society pages, with the storyline focusing on the tech mogul who married a normal girl rather than a socialite or model. Life as Mrs. Richardson came with adjustments. I moved into Max's Brookline estate, suddenly having to manage household staff and navigate social expectations I'd never imagined. At Max's suggestion, I resigned from my marketing position. He made a compelling case that with his frequent business travel, it would be difficult for both of us to maintain demanding careers if we wanted to start a family soon. Think of it as a new challenge, he said. Managing our social obligations, charitable work, and preparing for children. You can always go back to marketing later if you want. The first year was a whirlwind of charity galas board meetings as Max's +1 and redecorating parts of the mansion to reflect my taste. Max was often away on business, but he'd return with thoughtful gifts and stories from his travels. When he was home, we tried for a baby with passionate enthusiasm. After a year with no pregnancy, I began to worry. Max had been so clear about wanting children, mentioning it even on our first dates. His family legacy was important to him, and I knew he imagined passing down his business empire to a son or daughter someday. One evening, I found him in his study tense on a phone call. He didn't notice me at the doorway as he spoke. We need to consider backup plans. Yes, I know. The timeline is becoming an issue. He looked up, saw me, and quickly ended the call. Who was that? I asked. Just business, babe, he said, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. How about we take a vacation next month, somewhere tropical, where we can focus on making a family? I agreed, pushing away the knot of anxiety in my stomach. But that night marked the first hint that my fairy tale might not have the ending I'd imagined. The following month, instead of a tropical vacation, we scheduled appointments with a fertility specialist. Dr. Martin, a balding man with wire-rimmed glasses, suggested comprehensive testing for both of us. I agreed, immediately willing to try anything. Max seemed hesitant, but eventually consented to basic tests. My results came back showing a mild hormonal imbalance that might be making conception more difficult but was entirely treatable. Max's initial tests were inconclusive due to what Dr. Martin called sample issues, requiring a retest that Max repeatedly rescheduled due to business trips. Let's focus on treating you first, Max said when I brought up his incomplete testing. Dr. Martin said your hormone levels need adjustment. I started a regimen of fertility medications that made me bloated and emotional. Max was traveling more than ever, meaning we often missed my peak fertility days. When I expressed frustration about this, his response left me cold. If your body was working properly, timing wouldn't matter so much, he said, then immediately apologized, blaming stress from a difficult business deal. I forgave him, but the words lingered like a paper, cut small but surprisingly painful. As months passed, the pressure intensified. Max would check my basal body temperature charts and ask about my cycle in the same businesslike tone he used when reviewing quarterly reports. Sex became mechanical, scheduled around ovulation rather than desire. When each month ended in disappointment, the silence between us grew heavier. While dealing with fertility struggles, I was also trying to navigate Max's social world. Having quit my job, I was now expected to host dinner parties for his business associates, attend charity board meetings, and generally represent the Richardson family with grace. The women in Max's circle weren't unkind exactly, but there was always an invisible barrier. Many were from wealthy backgrounds themselves, having attended the same exclusive schools and summered at the same elite locations. My state, college education, and middle-class upbringing made me an outsider despite my married name. The questions about children began around our second anniversary. Any little ones on the horizon, they'd ask over champagne at benefit galas. "You're not getting any younger, dear," others would comment, as if I was unaware of my own age. The worst was meeting Max's mother, Diane Richardson. A willowy woman with perfectly coiffed silver hair and an old money pedigree, Diane had initially skipped our wedding, claiming illness. When we finally met at the Richardson family Christmas, gathering her assessment of me was swift and merciless. "Maxwell always did have unconventional taste," she said, eyeing my dress, which I'd thought appropriate but clearly didn't meet her standards. "I suppose what matters is giving him children to carry on the family name. You are planning on children, I assume?" "Yes, of course," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Well, don't wait too long. Fertility issues increase with age, you know. and adoption simply isn't the same for continuing a bloodline like ours. Max witnessed this exchange but said nothing, his silence feeling like tacit agreement with his mother's assessment. The only person who didn't make me feel inadequate was my college friend Amelia. Despite living in Chicago, she called regularly and visited whenever possible. "You know, you don't have to put up with this blue blood nonsense, right?" she said during one visit after witnessing a particularly uncomfortable dinner with Max's associate. "You were Rebecca Mitchell marketing genius before you were Mrs. Richardson." "I love Max," I insisted. "And we're building a life together. It's just taking longer than expected to add children to the picture." Amelia looked unconvinced but supportive. "Just don't lose yourself in trying to be what everyone else wants." After 18 months of trying, Max finally agreed to see a reproductive specialist. Dr. Sarah Goldstein came highly recommended with a practice catering to Boston's elite. Her office had the feel of a luxury spa rather than a medical facility, with plush seating and abstract art on the walls. Dr. Goldstein ordered comprehensive testing for both of us. My results showed the same hormonal imbalance, but nothing that should prevent pregnancy with proper treatment. The doctor seemed optimistic about my prognosis, but insisted on reviewing Max's results before developing a complete plan. Max's testing was scheduled during a rare week when he wasn't traveling. The night before his appointment, we had an intimate dinner at home. "What if it's me?" I asked quietly. "What if I can't give you children?" Max reached across the table and took my hand. "We'll figure it out," he said. "There are always options for people with resources." I took comfort in his words, not yet understanding the subtle threat they contained. The day of Max's testing, I offered to accompany him, but he firmly declined, saying he'd prefer privacy. When he returned home that evening, his mood was dark. "Did they say anything about the results?" I asked. "They need to run more tests," he said tersely. "But Dr. Goldstein wants to see us both next week." At that appointment, Dr. Goldstein recommended I begin a more aggressive treatment plan while they continued evaluating Max's results. "What about Max's testing?" I asked. "Do you have any preliminary findings?" An uncomfortable look passed between Dr. Goldstein and Max. "Mr. Richardson has requested his medical information remain private for now," she said carefully. "But we're exploring all avenues." On the drive home, Max exploded when I pressed him about keeping secrets from me. "Not everything is your business, Rebecca. You're so obsessed with getting pregnant that you can't respect basic boundaries." "But we're in this together," I protested. "How can we solve a problem if we're not being honest with each other?" "The problem," he said coldly, "is that you're broken. I married you thinking we'd have a family, and your body can't deliver on that promise." The words hit me like physical blows. That night, I cried myself to sleep while Max stayed in the guest bedroom. The next morning, he acted as if nothing had happened, kissing me goodbye before leaving for a business trip to Tokyo. During that week alone, I threw myself into preparations for our 3rd anniversary party. I hoped creating a perfect celebration might somehow repair the growing cracks in our marriage. The party was held at our home with 60 guests, including Max's business associates, family, friends, and a few of my former colleagues I'd managed to stay in touch with. Amelia flew in from Chicago as my emotional support. Max was charming throughout the evening, playing the role of devoted husband perfectly. During his toast, he held his champagne glass high and said, "To my beautiful wife and hopefully to becoming parents soon," while giving me a look that guests might have interpreted as loving but I recognized as accusatory. Later that evening, as guests mingled in the garden, Max's brother Ethan approached me. Unlike Max, Ethan had a relaxed demeanor and had always been kind to me, despite Diane's obvious disapproval. "How are you really doing, Rebecca?" he asked quietly. "I'm fine," I said automatically. "You don't have to pretend with me," he said. "I know my brother can be difficult when he doesn't get exactly what he wants." Before I could respond, Max appeared at my side, his hand gripping my waist too tightly. "Brother, stop monopolizing my wife," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. After the last guest departed and the staff began cleaning up, I checked Max's phone when he left it, charging in the kitchen. I'd never invaded his privacy before, but something about Ethan's comments and Max's recent behavior had triggered my suspicion. There in a text chain, with someone saved simply as L, was evidence of a planned meeting the following day at an address downtown I didn't recognize. The messages were vague, but suggested an established relationship. "Same time tomorrow." Missed you. I went to bed that night with the weight of uncertainty pressing down on me, not yet knowing that our anniversary party would be the last time we'd pretend to be a happy couple. The next day, I told the housekeeper I had errands to run. Instead, I parked down the street from the address in Max's text messages, a luxury apartment building in Back Bay. At 2 p.m., exactly, Max's black Bentley pulled up to the valet stand. My heart pounded as I watched him enter the building with a key card, suggesting this wasn't his first visit. 20 minutes later, I approached the doorman. "I'm here to surprise my husband, Maxwell Richardson," I said, summoning confidence I didn't feel. He just arrived to visit a friend. The doorman, recognizing the Richardson name, hesitated, only briefly before responding, "Ah, Mr. Richardson. Yes, he's up in Miss Chen's apartment on the 12th floor. Miss Chen." The name meant nothing to me, but the doorman's knowing smile said everything. I thanked him and walked to the elevator, my legs wooden beneath me. Apartment 1202 had a tasteful brass nameplate reading L. Chen. I stood frozen, my hand raised to knock, suddenly terrified of what I would find. Before I could decide whether to proceed, the door opened. A young Asian woman stood there, wearing only a man's dress shirt that I recognized as one I'd given Max for Christmas. She was stunning, perhaps in her late 20s, with long black hair and surprised almond eyes that widened when she saw me. "Can I help you?" she asked. "Is my husband here?" I managed to ask, my voice surprisingly steady. Before she could answer, Max appeared behind her, wearing only his pants. His face registered shock, then anger, then calculated calm in rapid succession. "Rebecca," he said coolly. "This is unexpected." "Clearly," I replied. The woman L. Chen looked between us, realization dawning on her face. "You're his wife, but he said you were separated." Max placed a hand on her shoulder. "Lily, give us a moment." When she reluctantly retreated inside, Max stepped into the hallway, pulling the door mostly closed behind him. "How did you find this place?" he demanded, not bothering to deny or explain. "Does it matter? How long has this been going on, Max?" He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "About a year. Lily's my assistant." A year. The betrayal was even deeper than I'd imagined. "All those business trips? Some were legitimate," he said, as if that should comfort me. "While I've been taking hormones, tracking my temperature, and blaming myself for not getting pregnant, you've been." I couldn't even finish the sentence. "Rebecca, be practical. This doesn't have to change anything. Many men in my position have arrangements." "Arrangements," I repeated in disbelief. "If you make a scene, you're the only one who will suffer," Max said, his voice hardening. "The prenup is ironclad. You'd leave with nothing." "Is that a threat?" "It's reality," he said coldly. "Now go home and calm down. We'll discuss this rationally later." I left the building in a daze, drove to a nearby park, and sat on a bench trying to process the magnitude of his betrayal. Not just the affair, but the months of blame making me feel defective while he was the one violating our vows. The next day, I made an appointment to see Dr. Goldstein privately. Her receptionist was reluctant to schedule me without Max, but I insisted it concerned my treatment plan. When I arrived at her office, Dr. Goldstein seemed uncomfortable. "Mrs. Richardson, I'm not sure I can discuss your case without your husband present. He's been quite explicit about being involved in all consultations." "This isn't about my treatment," I said. "I need to know about Max's test results." She straightened papers on her desk. "As I mentioned before, Mr. Richardson has requested confidentiality regarding his results. Doctor, I've just discovered my husband has been having an affair for a year while making me feel like our fertility issues are my fault. I think I deserve to know the truth." Dr. Goldstein's professional demeanor softened slightly. "I cannot violate patient confidentiality, Mrs. Richardson, even in these circumstances." "Then can you at least tell me if there's any medical reason I should continue these hormone treatments? Are they likely to help us conceive?" The doctor hesitated, clearly conflicted. "What I can say is that you should perhaps investigate further before continuing any treatment, particularly treatments with side effects." Her careful wording was the confirmation I needed. "He has fertility issues, doesn't he? Significant ones." "I've said all I can," Dr. Goldstein replied. "But Mrs. Richardson, Rebecca, I would be neglecting my duty as a physician if I didn't advise you to prioritize your own well-being right now." That evening, I called a college friend who worked at the same lab that processed our fertility tests. After some persuasion and a promise of anonymity, she agreed to look up Max's result. What she told me confirmed my suspicions. Max had severe oligospermia, extremely low sperm count, and poor motility. His condition made natural conception highly unlikely without medical intervention. The man who had been blaming me for our inability to conceive had known all along that he was the primary cause. I returned home determined to confront Max, but found divorce papers waiting on the kitchen counter instead. When Max came home that evening, he behaved as if this was a mutual decision we'd discussed. "I think we both know this isn't working," he said. "The paperwork is straightforward. You'll get the settlement outlined in the prenup." I opened the prenuptial agreement with shaking hands. The relevant clause stated clearly that in case of divorce within 7 years, I would receive a lump sum of $100,000 unless I had materially misrepresented myself or my capabilities before marriage, including the ability to bear children. In that case, I would receive nothing. "This is your plan," I asked in disbelief. "Divorce me and claim I deceived you about fertility issues that are actually yours." Max's expression hardened. "You can't prove that. My medical records are private, and no doctor will violate confidentiality." "You've been planning this," I realized. "The apartment for Lily making me quit my job so I'd be financially dependent." "You're being paranoid," he said dismissively. "But if you want to make accusations, remember that fighting me will be expensive." "How much savings do you have left from your little marketing job?" The answer was very little. I contributed most of my savings to charity causes Max had championed, believing we were building a life where my individual financial security wasn't a concern. The next morning, I discovered Max had removed me from our joint accounts. My credit cards were declined when I tried to buy coffee. When I returned home, the security code had been changed, and my fingerprint no longer unlocked the front door. The housekeeper let me in with visible discomfort. "Mr. Richardson said to tell you your things have been moved to the guest house," she explained apologetically, "and that his lawyer will be in touch about vacating the property next week." In the guest house, I found my clothing and personal items packed in suitcases. My laptop was there, but my phone had been switched to a basic model no longer on the family plan. I was being systematically erased from the life I'd built with Mac. When I tried to call Amelia from the guest house landline, the line was dead. Using my new basic phone, I learned Max had been busy. Multiple friends received emails from me saying I needed space during this difficult time and not to contact me. His media contacts had already begun constructing a narrative about our separation that painted Max as the victim of a deceptive gold digger. That night alone in the guest house, I understood the full scope of my vulnerability. I had no job, dwindling savings, and a husband using his power and wealth to isolate me while rewriting our history. The man I thought I'd married never existed. In his place was someone calculating and cruel, willing to destroy me to protect his ego and his secrets. 1 week after discovering Max's affair, I received formal notice to vacate our home. The legal document delivered by courier stated I had 48 hours to remove all personal property from the Richardson estate. My name wasn't on the deed, another detail I'd overlooked during our marriage, trusting Max's assurances that everything would be properly arranged soon. With nowhere else to go, I called Amelia in desperation. She immediately offered her Boston apartment, which she kept despite moving to Chicago for work. "It's small, but it's yours for as long as you need," she said. "And Rebecca, none of this is your fault." The day I left Max was conveniently away on business. The staff avoided eye contact as I loaded my few remaining possessions into a rideshare. Mrs. Winters, the housekeeper who had always been kind to me, slipped me an envelope as I was leaving. "My contact information," she whispered. "And there's a letter inside from Mr. Ethan. He asked me to give it to you privately." In Amelia's small one-bedroom apartment, I opened Ethan's letter. He expressed regret for not warning me sooner about Max's character, explained that he was currently abroad but would help when he returned, and included a check for $10,000 to help with immediate expenses. I was grateful but reluctant to cash it, still struggling to accept my new reality. The apartment, though clean and functional, was a stark contrast to the mansion I'd called home. I spent that first night curled on the unfamiliar sofa, too numb even to cry. The practical aspects of starting over at 34 were overwhelming. My credit cards had all been secondary accounts on Max's primary cards now canceled. I had to apply for my own credit with no recent income history. My resume had a 3-year gap, where I'd been Mrs. Richardson rather than a marketing executive. Even my driver's license needed updating with an address I didn't feel belonged to me. The financial reality was grim. My personal savings amounted to about $22,000, a substantial sum for most people, but potentially insufficient to fight a legal battle against Max's millions. Without the settlement from the prenup, I would need to rebuild my career quickly just to stay afloat. While I grappled with these practicalities, Max launched what could only be described as a smear campaign. An article appeared in Boston Business Quarterly titled "Tech Innovator Richardson Speaks on Personal Setback," which quoted anonymous sources claiming I had misrepresented critical personal information before our marriage. The implications were clear to anyone in our social circle. Social media buzzed with speculation about my supposed deception, with most assuming I had hidden fertility issues or perhaps even a previous child I'd abandoned. Former acquaintances from charity boards sent politely worded emails expressing understanding during this difficult time, while making it clear my presence would no longer be welcome at events. Even my parents called confused and concerned after receiving a formal letter from Max's attorney, advising them that any communication with me regarding the Richardson family could potentially violate confidentiality agreements. My father, always protective, wanted to drive to Boston immediately, but I convinced him to stay away, fearing Max would somehow use their involvement against me. 2 weeks after moving into Amelia's apartment, I attempted mediation as suggested by a free legal aid advisor I'd consulted. Max arrived with 2 attorneys from Boston's most prestigious law firm. I had only the legal aid advisor who looked painfully young and overwhelmed by the opposing team. Max offered a settlement of $50,000, half the prenup amount, if I would sign a document admitting I had knowingly concealed medical information material to the foundation of the marriage. This is extremely generous, considering the circumstances, his lead attorney said smoothly. Mr. Richardson could pursue damages for emotional distress and fraudulent misrepresentation. I didn't misrepresent anything I said. Max is the one with fertility issues he concealed. The lawyers exchanged glances. Mrs. Richardson, the female attorney, said making false accusations about Mr. Richardson's medical status could be considered defamatory. Furthermore, should you choose to pursue this line of defense, we are prepared to make this divorce very public. Every detail of your relationship and fertility treatments would be exposed in court documents, which, as you know, are public record in Massachusetts. It was a clear threat fight, and they would destroy what remained of my reputation and privacy. Take some time to consider the offer, Max said, speaking directly to me for the first time. It's more than fair considering what you did. His calm certainty was chilling. In that moment, I understood that Max truly believed his own lies. In his version of reality, I was the villain who had deceived him, not the other way around. The mediation ended without resolution. I returned to Amelia's apartment and experienced what I can only describe as a complete breakdown. For 2 days, I barely left the bed, unable to see a way forward. I had lost my husband, my home, my social standing, and potentially my professional reputation. At my lowest point, I considered whether fighting was even worth it. What saved me was strangely enough anger. On the 3rd morning, I woke up with a clarity and fury I hadn't felt before. Max had taken enough from me. I wouldn't let him take my dignity or truth as well. I was making coffee when my phone rang with an unknown number. It was Ethan Richardson. "Rebecca, I just got back in the country and heard what's happening," he said without preamble. "I'm so sorry. This is exactly what Max did to Serena." "Who's Serena?" I asked, confused. "His ex-girlfriend before you. They never married, but he had her move in, quit her job, the whole pattern. When she couldn't get pregnant, he dumped her and spread rumors that she was unstable. I should have warned you when he started pursuing you, but he seemed different with you. More genuine." "Did she know about his fertility issues?" I asked. There was a pause on the line. "You know about that." "I found out after he'd already started divorce proceedings." "Jesus," Ethan muttered. "No, Serena never knew. Max has known about his condition since college. Our mother convinced him it would affect his business reputation if it became public knowledge. Diane knows. She's been pushing him to marry someone from the right background who would quietly accept donor sperm or adoption without ever revealing his condition. When he chose you instead, someone independent with a career, she was furious. I think she always suspected you wouldn't play by their rules. I need to fight this, Ethan. But I don't have the resources Max does. I'll help you," he said firmly. Max got controlling interest in our father's company, but I have my own money. And I'm tired of watching him destroy people with his lies. That conversation with Ethan became my first step toward fighting back. I didn't yet know if I could win against Max, but for the first time since discovering his betrayal, I believed I might survive. The following morning, I met Thomas Harrison at his downtown office. Unlike Max's imposing legal team, Thomas worked from a modest suite with secondhand furniture and law books lining the walls. Amelia had recommended him, saying, "He doesn't look impressive, but he's taken down bigger sharks than your husband." Thomas listened intently as I explained my situation, occasionally jotting notes, but mostly just absorbing the details. When I finished, he removed his reading glasses and leaned back in his chair. "Mrs. Richardson." "Rebecca, please." "Rebecca, I won't sugarcoat this. Your husband has resources, connections, and a head start on controlling the narrative. Fighting him will be difficult and potentially ugly. I understand. Do you? Because his team will dig into every aspect of your life, looking for anything they can use against you. The fertility treatments you underwent, any therapy sessions, your past relationships, nothing will be off limits to them." I swallowed hard. I'm not the one with secrets to hide. Thomas studied me for a long moment before nodding. That's the right attitude. Now, what evidence do we have that Max is the one with fertility issues, not you? I explained about Dr. Goldstein's careful hint, and my friend at the lab who had confirmed Max's condition, but wouldn't testify for fear of losing her job. Not ideal, Thomas said. We need medical documentation we can actually submit to the court. Max's medical records are private, I said, repeating what Max himself had told me. In a divorce case involving accusations about fertility, a judge can order medical records to be produced if we have enough preliminary evidence to justify the request. And do we have that? Thomas smiled for the first time. Not yet, but we're going to get it. Over the next week, we developed a strategy. I would work with Thomas to document the medical facts while also investigating Max's finances for any irregularities that might give us leverage. My first task was meeting with Dr. Goldstein again. This time, I brought a formal letter from Thomas requesting my complete medical records, including all test results and treatment recommendations. Dr. Goldstein was professional, but guarded when we met. I've received requests from both your attorney and Mr. Richardson's attorney, she explained. I want to be clear that I can only release your records to you, not any information about Mr. Richardson. I understand, I said. But I need you to confirm in writing that my test results showed only minor hormonal imbalances that wouldn't prevent conception. That's accurate, and I can document that she agreed. I took a deep breath before asking my next question. Dr. Goldstein, would you be willing to testify that the fertility treatments you prescribed for me were unlikely to result in pregnancy if my partner had severe oligospermia? She hesitated. That would be a medical fact, not a breach of confidentiality. Yes, I could testify to that if subpoenaed. As I was leaving, Dr. Goldstein called me back. Mrs. Richardson, Rebecca, you should know that Miss Richardson contacted me last week offering a substantial donation to our clinic's research foundation if I would sign an affidavit supporting his version of events. My heart sank. And did you? I'm a doctor first and foremost. I don't falsify medical information for any amount of money. She handed me a business card. This is my personal cell number. Call me if you need anything else. That small victory gave me hope, but we needed more concrete evidence. The lab technician who had told me about Max's results was too scared to go on record, fearing both legal consequences and career repercussions. Thomas suggested we approach the situation from another angle. If Max has known about his condition since college, as his brother claims there must be previous doctors, previous records, we need to find them. Using the information from Ethan, we discovered Max had seen a specialist at Massachusetts General Hospital during his senior year at Harvard. Thomas filed a motion requesting those records be submitted to the court, arguing they were relevant to Max's claims about my alleged deception. While pursuing the medical evidence, I also began investigating Max's finances. During our marriage, I had occasionally signed documents for Max when he was traveling, giving me some familiarity with his business operations. Now I reviewed everything I could remember looking for inconsistencies or questionable practices. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. At a coffee shop near the courthouse, I recognized Detective Michael Roberts, who had attended several charity events hosted by Max's company. On impulse, I approached his table. "Detective Roberts, I'm Rebecca Richardson, or I was until recently." He looked up, recognition dawning. "Mrs. Richardson, I heard about your situation. Unfortunate." "More than unfortunate," I said. "I believe my husband may be accelerating our divorce to protect himself from something else. Possibly something in his business dealings." The detective's expression remained neutral, but he gestured to the chair opposite him. "That's an interesting theory." For the next hour, we spoke carefully. Detective Roberts never explicitly confirmed he was investigating Max, but he asked pointed questions about specific transactions I had witnessed and names of offshore entities I might have seen on documents. Before we parted, he handed me his card. "If you remember anything else about those Cayman Islands transfers or the Singapore subsidiary, give me a call. And Mrs. Richardson, be careful. People with resources like your husband's rarely face consequences. They don't choose for themselves." Armed with this new information, Thomas adjusted our strategy. "We don't need to prove financial wrongdoing to win your divorce case," he explained. "We just need enough evidence to make Max worry that a prolonged court battle might expose other issues he'd prefer to keep hidden." Our next step was approaching James Wilson, Max's business partner and closest friend. I expected immediate rejection, but to my surprise, James agreed to meet at a discreet restaurant outside the city. "Max doesn't know I'm here," he said as soon as we sat down. "And I want to keep it that way." "Why did you agree to meet then?" James looked uncomfortable. "Because what he's doing to you isn't right. We've been friends since college, but lately..." He trailed off. "Lately, what? The company is under scrutiny. There are some investment structures that might not hold up to close examination. Max is worried about potential investigations, and he needs to simplify his personal life before things get complicated. He's divorcing me to protect his money," I said, the pieces finally clicking into place. "That's part of it," James admitted. "But there's more. Max always wanted a family legacy. When you couldn't get pregnant, I'm not the one with fertility issues," I interrupted. James looked genuinely surprised. "What are you talking about?" I explained what I'd discovered about Max's condition and how he was trying to pin the blame on me. "Jesus," James muttered. "He told everyone it was you, that you'd hidden some previous condition. Would you be willing to sign an affidavit stating that Max knew about his condition long before our marriage?" James hesitated. "I don't know the specifics of his medical history, but I do know he's been planning this divorce for months, including setting up Lily Chen in that apartment. And I know he told me not to worry about you contesting anything because he had insurance, some plan to make sure you couldn't fight the prenup. Would you put that in writing?" After considering for a long moment, James nodded. "I'll have my personal attorney draft something. But Rebecca, be careful. Max doesn't lose gracefully." By the end of 3 weeks of investigation, we had assembled our case, my complete medical records. Dr. Goldstein's willingness to testify about the impossibility of my treatments working if Max had severe fertility issues, James Wilson's affidavit about Max's premeditated divorce plans, and Detective Roberts' unofficial confirmation that Max was under investigation for financial irregularities. Most surprisingly, we received notice that the judge had granted our motion to subpoena Max's medical records from his college years, a significant legal victory that Thomas said might change the entire direction of the case. "Max's attorney will fight this," Thomas warned. "But if those records confirm what we suspect, his entire claim against you falls apart." For the first time since discovering Max's betrayal, I felt a glimmer of hope. I was no longer powerless against his wealth and influence. I had truth on my side and finally the evidence to prove it. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in Suffolk County Family Court. I arrived an hour early, dressed in a conservative navy suit I'd purchased with part of Ethan's loan. Thomas met me at the courthouse steps, briefcase in hand, his expression confident. "Remember," he said quietly, as we walked inside Max's team, "we'll try to provoke an emotional reaction. Stay calm and let me handle the legal arguments." Courtroom 304 was smaller than I expected, with worn wooden benches and fluorescent lighting that cast everyone in an unflattering glow. Max arrived with 3 attorneys, all wearing suits that probably cost more than Thomas's monthly rent. He didn't look at me as they took their places at the opposite table. Judge Eleanor Waters entered briskly, a slim woman in her 60s with silver hair and piercing eyes. After the formalities, Max's lead attorney, Howard Brennan, presented their case first. "Your Honor, this is a straightforward matter. Mrs. Richardson materially misrepresented her ability to bear children before entering into marriage with my client. Mr. Richardson was clear from the beginning of their relationship that having a family was his priority. The prenuptial agreement clearly states that such misrepresentation voids any financial settlement. Thomas rose when it was our turn. Your Honor, my client categorically denies misrepresenting anything. In fact, evidence will show that Mr. Richardson is the party with significant fertility issues, a condition he has known about since college and deliberately concealed from my client. Furthermore, we have evidence suggesting Mr. Richardson fabricated this entire claim to avoid financial obligations as he faces other legal challenges. Judge Waters looked between the two tables. These are serious allegations from both sides. I'll need to see substantive evidence before making any determinations. She set dates for the full hearing and warned both parties against making public statements that could prejudice the case. As we left, the courthouse reporters shouted questions. Max's team had clearly alerted the media. Thomas steered me quickly to a waiting car, while Max gave a brief statement to the cameras, playing the role of wounded husband perfectly. That evening, I returned to Amelia's apartment to find it had been broken into. Nothing valuable was taken, but my files, copies of the evidence we had gathered, were gone. The laptop containing my notes was missing, along with my journal documenting the timeline of events with Max. This wasn't a random break-in, Thomas said when he arrived to assess the situation with the police. This was targeted. Detective Roberts, who responded personally to the call, agreed. Very professional job. No fingerprints, no evidence left behind. He lowered his voice. Good thing we kept copies of everything at my office. The break-in was just the beginning of Max's escalation. Over the next week, I received multiple calls from blocked numbers, sometimes just silence, sometimes whispered threats about knowing when to give up. My car was vandalized in Amelia's parking garage, the word liar scratched into the paint. Each incident was reported to the police with Detective Roberts ensuring the reports were properly filed. We're building a pattern, he explained. If this continues, we can request a restraining order against Mr. Richardson. Can you prove he's behind this? I asked. Not yet. But wealthy men like your husband don't usually do their own dirty work. They hire people who make mistakes eventually. The most unexpected confrontation came 3 days before our first full hearing. I was returning from a strategy meeting with Thomas when a black town car pulled alongside me. The back window lowered to reveal Diane Richardson's perfectly composed face. Rebecca, please get in. I think we should talk. Against my better judgment, I slid into the luxurious leather seat beside my soon-to-be ex-mother-in-law. She was dressed impeccably, as always, not a hair out of place, despite the humidity. This unpleasantness has gone on long enough, she said, without preamble. I have a proposal for you. I'm listening. Diane opened her handbag and removed a checkbook. $1 million. Cash. You sign the divorce papers admitting fault, drop all claims against Maxwell, and disappear from Boston. No further contact with anyone in our social circle. No interviews or tell-all book. The amount was 10 times what the prenup offered, a fortune that would secure my future. For a moment I was tempted. Why would you offer this if Max is so certain he'll win? I asked instead. Courts are unpredictable, and this public spectacle isn't good for anyone. Maxwell has a future to consider. A future that includes children with someone else, I assume. Something flickered across Diane's perfect composure. The Richardson family has certain expectations. Continuing the bloodline is one of them. Even though Max can't father children, Diane's expression hardened. Modern medicine offers many solutions for couples with the right resources. Maxwell's condition is manageable with appropriate medical intervention, so you've known all along about his fertility issues. Of course I've known. I'm his mother. I've overseen his medical care since he was diagnosed at 19. I reached into my purse and pressed record on my phone before asking my next question. And did you help him conceal this condition from me during our marriage? We did what was necessary to protect Maxwell's privacy and reputation. The Richardson name means something in this city. We couldn't have people gossiping about such personal matters, even if it meant gaslighting me and making me believe I was the problem. Diane waved a dismissive hand. You were offered the best medical care money could buy. If you'd been more patient and less emotional, appropriate arrangements could have been made. Arrangements like using donor sperm without telling me, or adoption presented as Max's biological child. Many families of our standing make similar arrangements. Discretion is part of the privilege of wealth. She tapped the checkbook resting between us. $1 million, Rebecca. A new start anywhere you choose. The alternative is a protracted legal battle that will drain you emotionally and financially, regardless of the outcome. I considered the offer for a long moment before responding. I have a counter-proposal, Diane. Tell Max to drop his claims against me, agree to a fair settlement based on Massachusetts law without the prenup penalty clause, and I'll keep your family's fertility secret private. Diane's eyes narrowed. You're in no position to make demands. I think I am. Because unlike Max, I have nothing left to lose. And I'm not afraid to tell the truth, even if it costs me that $1 million. The town car pulled over abruptly. This conversation is over, Diane said coldly. You'll regret not accepting my generosity. As I exited the car, I stopped and leaned back in. One question, Diane. Was any of it real? Did Max ever actually love me? For just a moment, I glimpsed something almost like sympathy in her eyes. Maxwell loves winning. Once he has what he wants, he moves on to the next challenge. That's how his father raised him. That's how I raised him. If you're looking for someone to blame for your broken heart, you might start with me. The car pulled away, leaving me on the sidewalk with the weight of her admission. I immediately called Thomas and Detective Roberts to report the attempted bribe, forwarding them the recording of our conversation. This was exactly the kind of evidence we needed to demonstrate the premeditated nature of Max's claims against me. In the days leading up to the full hearing, Thomas and I prepared intensively. We practiced my testimony repeatedly, anticipating the aggressive cross-examination Max's legal team would employ. We organized our evidence chronologically and thematically, creating a compelling narrative of deception, not by me, but by Max and his family. Tomorrow will be difficult, Thomas warned during our final preparation session. They'll attack your character, your motives, possibly even your mental stability. Remember that their goal is to provoke you into an emotional response that makes you appear unstable or vindictive. I'm ready, I said, though my stomach knotted at the thought of facing Max across the courtroom. That night, I barely slept, replaying moments from our marriage in my mind, searching for signs I might have missed, warnings I should have heeded. By morning, I was exhausted but resolute. This would be the beginning of the end of Max's control over my life, one way or another. The morning of the hearing, media had gathered outside the courthouse. Max's PR team had clearly been busy as several reporters called out questions about my fertility deception as Thomas escorted me inside. Max arrived shortly after, projecting confidence in a tailored charcoal suit, offering a practiced, sad smile to the cameras. Courtroom 304 was now packed with spectators, legal interns, courthouse regulars, and even a few recognizable faces from Boston's social scene, curious to witness the downfall of a former insider. Judge Waters called the court to order precisely at 9 a.m., her stern gaze sweeping the room. I'll remind everyone that this is a court of law, not entertainment, she said. Any disruptions will result in immediate removal. Max's attorney, Howard Brennan, delivered a compelling opening statement, painting Max as a devoted husband who had made his desire for children clear from the beginning of their relationship. Your Honor, Mr. Richardson built his life around the expectation of a family. Mrs. Richardson assured him repeatedly that she shared this goal and was capable of bearing children. Only after years of marriage did Mr. Richardson discover this was at best a misrepresentation of her medical reality. Thomas countered with our narrative, a calculated deception by Max, who had known about his own fertility issues for years, and who had used me as both a socially appropriate wife and a convenient scapegoat when he decided to move on. The evidence will show, Your Honor, that Mr. Richardson not only concealed his medical condition, but actively gaslighted my client into believing she was the problem. He then orchestrated this divorce to coincide with potential legal troubles in his business affairs, using my client as a distraction from more serious issues. Max was called to testify first. Under Brennan's careful questioning, he recounted our courtship, emphasizing how often we had discussed having children. His testimony painted me as increasingly desperate and emotionally unstable when pregnancy didn't occur. I supported Rebecca through everything Max said, his voice catching convincingly. The doctor appointments, the treatments, the disappointments. I never blamed her, even when we learned about her condition. And when did you learn about Mrs. Richardson's fertility issues? Brennan asked. About 2 years into our marriage. Dr. Goldstein explained that Rebecca had significant hormonal imbalances, that were preventing conception. We tried various treatments, but Rebecca became increasingly resentful and began blaming me instead. It took every ounce of self-control not to react to these blatant lies. Thomas had prepared me for this, reminding me repeatedly that my composed demeanor was crucial to our case. During cross-examination, Thomas approached Max methodically. "Mr. Richardson, did you ever complete a full fertility workup with Dr. Goldstein?" "Yes, of course," Max replied smoothly. "Everything came back normal. We've subpoenaed those records." "Are you certain about your answer?" A flicker of concern crossed Max's face before his confident expression returned. "There may have been some minor issues, but nothing significant." "Minor issues," Thomas repeated. "Like oligospermia, severe enough to make natural conception nearly impossible." "Objection," Brennan called. "Counsel is making assertions not in evidence." Sustained Judge Waters ruled. "Mr. Harrison, please confine yourself to questions." Thomas nodded and changed direction. "Mr. Richardson, did you ever seek treatment for fertility issues before your marriage to my client?" "No," Max said firmly. "Were you ever diagnosed with any reproductive issues during your college years?" Max hesitated just long enough to be noticeable. "I had some routine tests." "Nothing significant was found. So you would have no objection to this court reviewing your medical records from Harvard University Health Services." The color drained from Max's face. "Those are private medical records from nearly 20 years ago. They're not relevant to this case." "Your Honor," Thomas addressed the judge, "Mr. Richardson has made my client's fertility the central issue in this case. His own medical history is directly relevant to his claims." Judge Waters nodded. "I've already ruled on this matter, Mr. Brennan. The Harvard medical records will be admitted." Thomas continued his questioning, methodically exposing inconsistencies in Max's timeline and claims. By the time my estranged husband left the stand, his earlier confidence had visibly eroded. When it was my turn to testify, I focused on remaining calm and direct, just as Thomas and I had practiced. I described our marriage, the increasing pressure about having children, and my devastating discovery of Max's affair. During cross-examination, Brennan was aggressive, suggesting I had trapped Max into marriage, knowing I couldn't have children, then became jealous and vindictive when he sought comfort elsewhere. "Mrs. Richardson," he asked with false sympathy, "isn't it true that when you realized you couldn't fulfill your husband's desire for a family, you decided to punish him by fabricating these claims about his fertility?" "No," I replied steadily. "I underwent painful and expensive fertility treatments because Max convinced me I was the problem. I only discovered he had severe fertility issues after he had already begun divorce proceedings." "So convenient that you discovered this information, just when it might benefit you financially," Brennan said with a smirk. "Objection," Thomas called. "Counsel is editorializing." Sustained Judge Waters agreed. "Mr. Brennan, confine yourself to questions." The turning point came when Dr. Sarah Goldstein took the stand. Despite clear discomfort at being caught between warring spouses, she maintained her professional integrity. Dr. Goldstein, Thomas asked, "Based on your examination of Rebecca Richardson, was there any medical reason she could not conceive a child?" Mrs. Richardson had a mild hormonal imbalance that could have made conception more difficult, but certainly not impossible. With the treatments we prescribed, her chances of conception should have been good, assuming her partner had normal fertility. And if her partner had severe oligospermia, extremely low sperm count, and poor motility, would your treatments have been effective? Dr. Goldstein chose her words carefully. In that scenario, natural conception would be highly unlikely, regardless of Mrs. Richardson's treatment. Medical intervention focused on the male factor would have been the appropriate course of action. Brennan tried to undermine her testimony during cross-examination, suggesting she might be biased toward me as her patient. But Dr. Goldstein remained unflappable, her medical expertise lending weight to our case. The most dramatic moment came when James Wilson, Max's business partner, testified about Max's premeditated approach to our divorce. "James, how long have you known Maxwell Richardson?" Thomas asked. "Since our freshman year at Harvard. Almost 20 years. And were you aware of any medical conditions Mr. Richardson had during college?" James glanced uncomfortably at Max before answering. "Yes. Max was diagnosed with a fertility issue during junior year. He was quite upset about it." A murmur ran through the courtroom. Max's expression darkened as his longtime friend continued. Did Mr. Richardson ever discuss how he would handle this condition in his marriage to Rebecca? He said it wouldn't be an issue, that they would use medical intervention when the time came, but he didn't want to worry Rebecca with the details beforehand. Did he ever express concern that Rebecca might leave him if she knew about his condition? Not exactly, James said hesitantly. It was more that he didn't want it becoming public knowledge. His mother was particularly concerned about that. When did Mr. Richardson begin planning his divorce from my client? Objection, Brennan interjected. Calls for speculation. I'll rephrase, Thomas said smoothly. Mr. Wilson, did Maxwell Richardson ever discuss divorcing Rebecca before their fertility issues became apparent? After a long pause, James nodded. About 6 months ago, Max mentioned he was preparing an exit strategy from his marriage. He said the timing needed to align with some business restructuring. And was this around the same time he established his relationship with Lily Chen? Objection, relevance, Brennan nearly shouted. Your Honor, Thomas countered. Mr. Richardson's relationship with Miss Chen directly contradicts his claim that fertility issues in his marriage were unknown to him or caused by my client. I'll allow it, Judge Waters ruled. The witness will answer. James looked directly at me rather than Max as he responded. Yes. Max had already set Lily up in an apartment downtown by then. He told me she was pregnant with his child. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Waters banged her gavel sharply, calling for order. Max's face had gone from pale to flushed with anger, his careful composure finally cracking. Just as the court was settling, a bailiff approached Judge Waters, handing her a sealed envelope. She paused reading the cover note, then opened it carefully. Whatever she saw inside caused her expression to shift from professional neutrality to unmistakable displeasure. We will take a 30-minute recess, she announced abruptly. Counsel for both parties in my chambers immediately. The courtroom buzzed with speculation as Judge Waters departed. Max huddled with his legal team, their expressions increasingly concerned. Thomas gave my hand a reassuring squeeze before following the judge's clerk toward chambers. That half hour felt like the longest of my life. I sat alone at our table, avoiding eye contact with Max and the curious spectators. Whatever was in that envelope had clearly disrupted the proceedings, but I had no idea if it would help or harm our case. When Judge Waters returned, her demeanor had changed noticeably. She seemed both more focused and more severe as she called the court back to order. Before we continue with testimony, I have received evidence that requires immediate attention, she announced. This court takes very seriously any attempt to manipulate these proceedings or present false information. She held up the envelope. I have here documentation that directly contradicts testimony given under oath today. Mr. Brennan, does your client wish to revise any statements he has made to this court? Max's attorney looked genuinely confused. Your Honor, without knowing the nature of this documentation, I cannot advise my client. Very well. Judge Waters nodded to the bailiff, who distributed copies of the documents to both legal teams. These records include a certified DNA test confirming that Maxwell Richardson is the biological father of a child born to Lily Chen 3 months ago. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. I felt simultaneously vindicated and newly betrayed. Max had not only been unfaithful, but had actually fathered a child while making me believe I was the reason we couldn't have a family. Additionally, Judge Waters continued, these documents contain financial records showing substantial payments to Miss Chen, apparently to secure her silence about the child, as well as evidence of attempts to tamper with medical records that would have been submitted to this court. Max's attorney rose quickly. Your Honor, my client needs time to review these documents and their authenticity. Mr. Brennan, the DNA test was conducted by an independent laboratory under court supervision in a related paternity case. The financial records have been verified by forensic accountants working with the Massachusetts Attorney General's office. Does your client wish to dispute their validity under penalty of perjury? Max and his attorney conferred hurriedly, their whispered conversation increasingly heated. Finally, Brennan addressed the court again. Your Honor, in light of this new information, my client requests a brief adjournment to reassess our position. Judge Waters's expression was stern. Mr. Richardson has made serious accusations against Mrs. Richardson. Claims that these documents suggest were not only false, but deliberately fabricated to defraud this court. I am inclined to rule immediately on the enforceability of the prenuptial agreement based on evidence of bad faith. The remainder of the day was a blur of legal arguments and procedural discussions. By the time Judge Waters finally adjourned proceedings, scheduling her ruling for the following morning, I was emotionally and physically exhausted. But beneath the fatigue was a growing sense that justice might actually prevail. As I left the courthouse, with Thomas avoiding the reporters, shouting questions, I finally asked what I'd been wondering all day. Where did those documents come from? The DNA test and financial records? Thomas smiled slightly. Let's just say Detective Roberts has friends in the prosecutor's office who thought these materials might be relevant to your divorce case. So Max is under criminal investigation. I couldn't possibly comment on an ongoing investigation, Thomas replied, but his expression confirmed my suspicion. Let's focus on tomorrow's ruling. For the first time since this began, I think we're going to win. That night, I slept deeply for the first time in months, the weight of uncertainty finally lifting from my shoulders. Whatever happened next, the truth about Max had been exposed not just to me, but to the court and eventually to the world he had tried so hard to deceive. Judge Waters delivered her ruling at precisely 9 a.m. the next morning. The courtroom was even more crowded than before, news of the dramatic revelations having spread throughout Boston's legal community. Max sat stiffly at his table, a muscle twitching in his jaw, his attorneys looking grim. After careful consideration of all evidence presented, including the troubling documents received yesterday, Judge Waters began this court, makes the following findings. She detailed Max's deliberate concealment of his fertility condition, his affair with Lily Chen, resulting in a child, and most damning of all, his calculated attempt to use the prenuptial agreement to deny me any financial settlement by fabricating claims about my fertility. The court finds that Maxwell Richardson entered into these divorce proceedings in bad faith with the deliberate intention of defrauding both Mrs. Richardson and this court. Such behavior represents an egregious abuse of the legal system. Judge Waters looked directly at Max as she continued. The prenuptial agreement is hereby voided due to fraud on the part of Mr. Richardson. Mrs. Richardson is entitled to an equitable division of marital assets, according to Massachusetts law, without regard to the penalty clauses in the prenuptial agreement. She awarded me half of all assets acquired during our marriage, an amount that would exceed $10 million, as well as our vacation home in Vermont, and a lump sum for emotional distress. Furthermore, she ordered Max to pay all my legal fees and referred him to the district attorney for potential perjury charges. Finally, Judge Waters concluded this court rarely comments on matters beyond the legal issues at hand. However, I feel compelled to note that Mr. Richardson's behavior throughout this marriage and these proceedings demonstrates a disturbing pattern of manipulation and emotional abuse. Mrs. Richardson, the court commends your courage in standing up to such treatment. As we left the courthouse, the media that had once repeated Max's narrative now clamored for my statement. Thomas advised against speaking, but I felt a need for closure. I came to this court seeking justice, not revenge, I told the reporters. Today's ruling affirms what I've known all along, that truth eventually prevails over power and privilege. I hope my experience encourages other women facing similar situations to stand their ground. The aftermath unfolded rapidly. The Boston Globe ran an in-depth story about the case, highlighting the judge's unprecedented comments about Max's conduct. Social media erupted with support for me, many women sharing their own experiences with gaslighting and emotional abuse. Max faced consequences beyond our divorce. The Securities and Exchange Commission announced an investigation into Richardson Innovations' financial practices, particularly the offshore accounts we had discovered. Several board members resigned, distancing themselves from the growing scandal. Diane Richardson retreated to the family's estate in Rhode Island, refusing all interview requests. Ethan, however, reached out to express his relief at the outcome and his hope that we might maintain some contact. "You were the best thing that ever happened to my brother," he said when we met for coffee. He just wasn't capable of recognizing it. Lily Chen eventually gave an exclusive interview to Boston Magazine, revealing that Max had promised to divorce me and marry her once their child was born, only to renege when pregnancy threatened his carefully constructed public image. She had turned over the evidence to authorities when she realized he intended to deny paternity and cut her off financially. As for me, the months following the divorce were a period of healing and rediscovery. I used part of the settlement to purchase a comfortable brownstone in Back Bay, nothing as ostentatious as the Richardson estate, but truly mine in a way that mansion never was. With Amelia's encouragement, I launched Mitchell Marketing Consultancy, focusing on helping small businesses and nonprofits. My experience as the underdog fighting against wealth and power gave me unique insight into building authentic brand narratives. Dr. Goldstein and I developed a friendship beyond our doctor-patient relationship. Inspired by my case, she established a foundation providing support and legal resources to women experiencing reproductive coercion or medical gaslighting. I proudly served on its advisory board. 1 year after the divorce was finalized, I received an unexpected invitation to speak at a women's leadership conference about resilience and reinvention. Standing at the podium looking out at hundreds of attentive faces, I felt a sense of purpose that had been missing during my years as Mrs. Richardson. My story isn't unique, I told the audience. Many of us have experienced relationships where we gradually lost our sense of reality and self-worth. What makes my experience unusual is that I had irrefutable evidence of the deception that enveloped the judge opened in court. Most gaslighting occurs without such convenient proof. I explained how rebuilding after betrayal requires reconnecting with your authentic self, the person you were before someone else's narrative took over. For me, that meant reclaiming my professional identity while also honoring the lessons from my marriage. I don't regret my years with Max, I admitted. They taught me about my own strength and resilience. They showed me the importance of financial independence and trusting my instinct. Most importantly, they led me here to this new chapter where I get to define success on my own terms. News about Max continued to appear occasionally in my social media feeds. His company struggled under regulatory scrutiny, eventually being acquired for a fraction of its former valuation. He maintained custody rights to his child with Lily, but remained unmarried, his reputation in Boston's social circles permanently damaged. As for me, I gradually opened myself to new relationships, but with a wisdom and self-protection I hadn't possessed before. I continued therapy, working through the trauma of betrayal and rebuilding my capacity for trust. I even began considering adoption as a single mother, reclaiming the dream of family that Max had nearly destroyed. The envelope that changed everything in court became a metaphor in my mind for the power of truth. Sometimes justice arrives in unexpected packages at moments when we've almost lost hope. My journey from victim to victor wasn't about winning against Max, but about reclaiming my own story. Life after divorce isn't a straight line to happiness. It's a winding path with setbacks and unexpected turns. But with each step forward, the control Max once held over my life diminished, replaced by the freedom to create a future entirely my own. So, if you're watching this and facing your own seemingly impossible battle, remember that what seems like the end may actually be the beginning of something better. Stand firm in your truth, gather allies who believe in you, and never underestimate your capacity to rebuild from ashes. I would love to hear your thoughts on this story. Have you ever had to start over after betrayal? What helped you find strength when you felt powerless? Please share in the comments below, and if you found my story valuable, hit that like button and subscribe to hear more journeys of resilience and renewal. Thank you for being part of my healing by listening, and remember, sometimes the most beautiful chapters of our lives come after the most painful ones.